It is fascinating. I agree with you. Something else that piqued my interest. There are articles, screaming headlines in the United States because of Donald Trump's sudden change on the issue of Ukraine. God, man, this has been so fascinating to me. I've never seen anything like it, where it's this kind of quick pivot, where all of a sudden things that have been going on for the last 3 years, like unprovoked war of aggression, well, that's no longer said. Zelensky is a dictator. Zelensky would lose if he had elections. Like they're trashing him because they're trying to create this context for we need to end the war. He's an impediment to that. So we need to trash the impediment to ending the war. We can't go with the same language that we did before because that language prevents us from ending the war. Like all of the stuff is changing in relation to we are trying to end the war. The screaming headlines come out. Oh my God, if Donald Trump is abandoning Ukraine, what does it mean for Taiwan? There's several. Like for example, just random search, Trump, Taiwan. That's the search. Screaming headlines. Taiwan watches Trump undercut Ukraine, hoping it won't be next. Taiwan holds its breath as Trump turns on Ukraine. Trump abrupt change on U.S. policy on Ukraine raises questions about Taiwan. So their take is, well, Donald Trump is abandoning Ukraine. And because he's abandoning Ukraine, he may also abandon Taiwan to the Chinese. No, that is fascinating. That is fascinating. That's like abandoning Hawaii. Give me a take on just their response in regards to the way they're treating Taiwan as if it's not part of China, and as if the one China policy is not U.S. framing of the one China policy, unless something has changed, which they have not articulated a change yet. But the headlines suggest something otherwise. It's just fascinating. Give me your take on this.
Well, Jamal, there's dual messaging going on. On the one hand, they have removed language from the State Department fact sheet saying that they do not support Taiwan independence. In other words, you guys go ahead, do your worst, declare independence if you want to. So there's some very, very, subtle messaging. At the same time, the fact that they're cutting and running from Ukraine sends the message to, the people on Taiwan Island that this is what's in store for them next, that the U.S. is simply weaponizing and using them as they used Ukraine itself. So there is some real double messaging going on. But as I said before, the cutting and running out of Ukraine is actually designed to consolidate forces so that they can go and accelerate escalate to war against China over Taiwan. And so it's a pivot out of Ukraine into
Taiwan.
Right?
Do you really believe, though, that every war game that they've ever had against China, we lost? The Department of Defense knows this because they would have to fight that war. This is not, 1825. We're talking about the aircraft carriers, which are infinitely vulnerable to long-range missiles. China is effectively an island in the way that it would be fought. Are they really, do you really think, and does China really think that these guys are preparing for war? Or do you think they're using Taiwan in a similar way as a bargaining chip? How can I say this? If you were in the United States, I'll give it this way. Every country has something similar to it. Slavery, Jim Crow, racism, those type of things are red lines. And you would even have white people feel some kind of way if they see overt racism taking place in their presence. It is not uniquely American, but that specific black-white thing is uniquely American. Every country has their own thing. We get it on a gut level in a way that other countries may not necessarily get that particular issue. Taiwan is that way for China. But it's possible that the U.S. doesn't quite get that, or at the very least, Trump doesn't quite get that. Do you think that Taiwan is a bargaining chip? That it's not that Trump wants to go to war, that all things being equal, Trump realizes the horse is out the barn. We need to somehow contain China because we want to be, the hegemon of the world. God made it that way. And because God made it that way, that we must be hegemon or the world must go to shit otherwise. That Taiwan is just a bargaining chip that he's willing to inflame, use, threaten, all of those things in order to get China to do something. I don't know what that something is. I hope you get my point, that the goal of it is not necessarily war in and of itself. The goal of it is some kind of concession. What do you think about that point of view or that take?
It's possible, Jamal. And like I said, the Trump administration is not a single entity. There are different
Right.
factions inside it. There's Hegseth and Rubio, etc. Neocons. They want war with China. For them, Russia was the appetizer on the war to China. China was the main dish, and that has been a constant for all of the neocons. It's been a constant since 2008. Essentially, China is the big target. China is the big threat. We have to destroy China. And there was a slight, debate. Do we go through Russia on our way to China, or do we knock out China first and then knock out Russia afterwards? In other words, is Russia an appetizer or is it dessert? That was the question for the Biden administration and the Trump administration. Under the Biden administration, the appetizer theorists won out. This was the Nuland faction, because they have strong attachments to Ukraine. They're very invested in that. And so they decided that they were going to knock Russia out first, because Russia is just a gas station with nukes, right? I mean, how could it even, put up a fight, right? It was a Potemkin state just waiting to collapse. And then that turned out not to be true. And by doing that, they drove Russia and China closer together, even closer than they already were, which is kind of going against the cardinal rule of geopolitics since Kissinger enunciated in the 1980s. So having driven Russia and China together, there's a certain analysis which says that what Trump is trying to do is he's making nice with Russia, he's abandoning Ukraine, and he's trying to do a reverse Kissinger, that is, pull Russia away from China rather than drive them together, which is what Biden did. That's one viewpoint. Another viewpoint, and I think there's an argument for this, is that Trump is simply diversifying. That is to say, he's creating, as Pete Hegseth refers to it explicitly, a division of labor, that they're deliberately building on their different strengths, and that Europe is going to pin down Russia, and it's on Europe's responsibility to continue taking the fight to Russia. And in the meantime, the United States will focus on the Pacific, on China. And so this is a kind of division of labor theory, right?
That's so cynical. Oh, that's so cynical. Look, you might be wrong.
I mean, this is what they're saying. This is literally what they're saying. You can, hear Pete Hegseth. He talks about
I don't
comparative advantage and division of labor in this, global war. So that's one viewpoint. But there are always subtleties inside this. And one of the things to understand is, as I said before, Trump does not want war with a superpower, because he himself does not like losing. And he understands that waging war with China would be a losing proposition. As you pointed out,
Exactly.
all the war games, point that out very, very clearly. Trump is not anti-war, but he is anti-losing war. He hates losers. He hated John McCain and anybody who was associated with him. So that's the piece that he does not want. And that is a potential mitigating factor, which then lets us ask, then will Trump keep this contestation just on the level of economic warfare? If that is the case, economic warfare, tech warfare, then eventually that will be a good thing, because the global South will arise and the US will essentially be forced to come to grips with the diminishment of its empire. Already it seems to be doing that a little bit, because seems to be working on the little empire rather than the big empire, rather than the global empire, right? But, and this is the big but, as I said, there are neocons that are very influential inside of Trump's administration. I'm talking about Hegseth, I'm talking about, Rubio, I'm talking about the CIA director, I'm also talking about the incoming Undersecretary of Defense. And these people really believe that Taiwan, quote unquote, should be independent. I believe that they're going to encourage that. There are already legislative measures that have already set that into place. The Taiwan Enhanced Resiliency Act was originally named, a law to support the independence of Taiwan. So the legislative train has already left. The House is being moved on a flatbed car towards war. And then you ask the $64,000 question: how do they think they can win the war?
Right.
It's insanity, right? It is insanity.
I mean, by the way, even if I'm Taiwanese, like if I am living in Taiwan and I'm looking at what's happening to Ukraine, and I think to myself, China has 1.5 billion people. We're a little island. We're going to lose. Like, I cannot wrap my head around the politics of independence in this way. And I don't live there, so fair enough, right?
Well, I mean, the first thing, Jamal, is it's not about independence at all, right? Because what they call Taiwan independence is simply further U.S. colonization of Taiwan. Taiwan has always been used as a U.S. Base, an unsinkable aircraft carrier. From the period from 1972, 1979 until 2015 or so, it was used as a hedge against China. So the U.S. was kind of playing this kind of gray zone, game where it was pretending that it wasn't, but it really was a para-colony. And then after 2016, it came back into being a U.S. colony again. And the U.S. has been weaponizing it, Ukrainizing it, turning it into an arms depot and essentially a staging zone for war against China. That is its main role. Now, how do the Taiwanese think? They hate it. They want nothing to do with it. The vast majority of people on Taiwan Island want to keep their current status quo. But the U.S. quisling DPP, which is in power now, and it's been in power since the previous administration and etc., they have very, very close ties to the U.S. deep state. I mean,
yes.
Louise Chow, the vice president, was an American citizen. She was a kind of darling in the U.S. neocon circuit. And so they have their claws deeply inside of the ruling party and the government administration. So once again, it comes back to the question, what makes them think that they can win this war? And to understand that, you have to go back to this notion of offsets that was most clearly enunciated by an organization, a deep state think tank called CNAS, Center for New American Security. CNAS, that New American Security, is a near rhyming analog of Project for a New American Century. Center for New American Security, Project for a New American Century. They're essentially a descendant of the PNAC project. And CNAS has gamed out excessively and in incredible detail how they want to take the war to China. And they've mapped out, a 100-point plan, different kinds of hybrid warfare. But the other thing they mapped out is something called the third offset. Okay, the offsets are a game of rock, paper, scissors in war doctrine, right? Rock defeats scissors,
right?
And cloth defeats rock. Well,
everybody can be defeated, but it's the mix-up that makes the difference in whether or not you win that individual contest or not.
Yeah, the first offset was what the United States had against the Soviet Union, which is mass. We just have bigger bombs. We have a bigger bomb than you, and we can destroy you. You may have massed conventional forces along the border, but we simply have more mass. We have a bigger bomb than you. That is the first offset. It's the first technological offset against an asymmetrical disadvantage. But this didn't last because the Soviet Union built its own bomb very rapidly.
Right.
So then the US shifted to the second offset. What is the second offset? The second offset is precision. And that's the notion that we have precision guided munitions that can knock your missiles out of the air or off their launchers before they can even be before they can do anything to us.
Yeah.
And this was the entire generation of smart bombs and cruise missiles, etc. That's characterized by, if mass is characterized by the atomic bomb or the nuclear weapons, precision is characterized by the cruise missile. So we have cruise missiles. Okay. Now, in the case of China, China has an incredible panoply of missiles that they can use to defend their territory and their littoral waters. The Dongfeng class, 25, 26, all of these things are essentially China's precision defense against U.S. encroachment, U.S. offense against it. Okay. So then what they developed was something called the third offset. So if the first offset is mass, the second offset is precision. What do you think the third offset is?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, it's not
third
hypersonics. It's not nuclear. I mean, nuclear kills everybody. I mean, we're talking about a war. We're talking about something we need to win.
The third offset is diffusion, dispersion, distribution of forces. So if you have your opponent who can attack you in a precise way, in incredibly pinpoint way, what you want to do is you want to diffuse your forces and so overwhelm them. And so this is why the U.S. has been training on island hopping across all of the islands of the first island chain. They're literally, packing the entire island chain with forces that can move rapidly from island to island, scoot and shoot, etc. And once you have that, then they believe that they can overcome China's defensive capacity. They call it A2AD, anti-access area defense. It just means China has the capacity to defend itself. But it sounds weird if you think that you're trying to overcome China's defensive capacities. So they say we're going to overcome China's A2AD capacities. The primary weapon that signifies the third offset is the networked drone. That is drone swarming. If you have swarms of drones, then regardless of your precision, you can simply overwhelm with swarms of drones. And so this is why the US is working on, for example, with Anduril and others, the Replicator project. They plan to create tens, hundreds of thousands of cheap missiles and deadly drones. And another piece of the third offset is automation. That is AI-driven warfare. So that is in the works right now. That's the work of, Anduril and Palantir and all these other companies that are, whose stock is, has gone up, 500%. They're preparing for war with China using automation and diffusion and subsurface and long-range standoff, etc. This is the third offset. So there is a sector of the U.S. deep state, primarily centered around CNAS and a few other think tanks, that believes that they can win a war with China. And there's one more piece. There's one more piece that they have lined up, which is, it's essentially an open secret. And that is they're going to use nukes. They're going to nuke China. Okay, they're preparing tactical nukes, and they're arguing that the spectrum of war from conventional to nuclear simply doesn't exist anymore. It's simply just one long continuum, and we're going to use nuclear weapons. The U.S. has planned this out for a long time. Right now, it's essentially doctrine. And so
therein lies the rub, KJ. The moment that, like, if you and I are in a contest, and both of us die in that contest, then you don't win that contest. Like, winning a war is winning a war. It means that even if you have one man standing, there's one man standing that the opposition doesn't have. It's a pure victory in that sense. But at the very least, you have somebody standing there that says, I won this war, I'm still here. A nuclear war doesn't do that. Both lose.
Jamal, there are two theories around nuclear war. And one theory is what is called counter force, and the other is called counter value. countervalue is known as MAD, mutual assured destruction. You know,
Right.
you knock out our cities, we knock out yours. Essentially, we all die. That was traditional nuclear doctrine. Starting around the 1980s, the US started to develop a nuclear doctrine called counterforce. And counterforce is also sometimes referred to as nuts, N-U-T-S. But essentially, the theory is that we can win a nuclear war if we get a sucker punch, if we get our
If we can hit our opponent,
if we
like
can hit
just
our
out the blue one
opponent
day.
first, fast
Yeah.
enough, then we win. And we may have, 10, 20% destruction of our cities, but we can live with that. We're billionaires. We'll just go into our caves and have good lives until, the radiation dissipates. But there is currently the US nuclear doctrine is largely based on counterforce. In other words, nuclear first strike. In other words, a nuclear sucker punch. And that's why they believe they can get away with it. And they believe that tactical nuclear weapons should and can be part of an ordinary spectrum of war. This is what
These people are sociopaths.
they are sociopaths. I mean, Michelle Flournoy, who founded CNAS along with Kurt Campbell, she said, when we go to war, we're going to knock out all of China's ships out of the water, blast them out of the water in 72 hours. Now, that's insane. That's not possible unless you're talking about something like tactical nuclear weapons.
KJ, man, I always appreciate these conversations. This was a terrifying one. I'll put it on that one, but informed, and I thank you for it. I really do. KJ, no, he's a political analyst, writer, teacher, specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia Pacific region. KJ, where can people find you?
They can find me on the China Report and also on various progressive websites, Counterpunch, MR Online, Black Agenda Report, LA Progressive, Popular Resistance, etc.
Very cool, man. Thank you for this. I really do appreciate it. Be safe, KJ.
Thank you.
All right. We have come to the end of the show. Let's go into the chats. Let's say, Mr. Riffley, Hunter Biden was useful because he was compromised. The Ukrainian criminal element could trust him. The Democrats used him in an operation to provoke Russia. See, I don't think they used him in an operation to provoke Russia. I think I mentioned this earlier. I think Hunter Biden was a grifter. And I think he had the luxury of having a dad who just so happened to be VP. Ukraine, rational actors in that case, were like, hey, how do we get closer to the U.S. government and the largesse of that government? How do we influence the political situation in America? Oh, I know. Let me hire the vice president's kid. No, he doesn't know anything about oil and gas. No, he doesn't know anything about Ukraine. But his last name is Biden. That's what we need. The last name being Biden. And so you give him an office. You give him $80,000 a month. And he sits there and shuts the hell up. Up until the point where you need to have a conversation with Joe Biden in some way. I think they were effectively using him as a gateway to Biden. That's my take. I could be wrong on that, but that's my take. Jabari, VOC Media, Zelensky should move to Florida with all the other puppets. What did they say? He should move to France? Is that what it was leaked that the Trump administration was like, hey, that guy should move to France? Luigi Maggione did nothing wrong. RJ Raymond. Well, he is in a courtroom. And they're going to make that choice on whether he's the guy. Apparently, there's a lot of stuff that's been bubbling up that, let's say, adds questions to whether or not they got the right person or whether or not all of the legal loopholes were followed, if that makes sense. We'll see. He is considered a hero. I'll give you that. But I think Caleb Maupin is right. Killing that guy didn't change anything. They put another cog in the wheel, and the whole system keeps going. Sir Bikes a lot. I heard Amtrak train horn in the background. Music to my ears, music to my loving ears. Richard, always a great show. Thank you so much. Oh, Richard, man, thank you for watching. Look, I want to ask all of you, like it, share it, subscribe to this channel. I'm trying to grow. I want to hit 40K. No, I wasn't able to get it before the end of the year, but eventually we'll get there. I want to thank all of you. You can always support this content through PayPal, Patreon, Super Chats, memberships, all of those things. allow this content to be what this content is. And you have my deepest appreciation for caring enough to donate in that way. Yeah, I'm heartened by it. I really am. We have one more before I close. Sir Bike Salat. I heard. Oh, that was the one. All right. I'm going to say like the show, share this show, and subscribe to it. You guys have a fantastic day. Jamal Thomas Morning Show episode, what is this, 102? Signing off.